we did among ourselves. No, actually, we called him Mr. Piatigorsky all the time, you know. He still wanted to play the cello and got a full-size cello for his 7th birthday. Grisha was always tall for his age, but you know, you can see pictures of Feuermann and Jackie Dupre when they were kids and they're playing a full-size cello. So, I mean, okay. Grisha quickly became the Wunderkind of Ekaterinaslav's conservatory. That was the town that he was born in. His father was a frustrated musician and resented being in his in-laws' business. He abandoned the family to go to St. Petersburg to study with Leopold Auer and become the soloist he imagined. That left Grisha and his brother in charge of the family financially. Grisha was the predominant breadwinner. After an unsuccessful year, his father returned, and his father quickly announced the marriage of one of his sisters to a low-life, abusive, alcoholic neighbor. Grisha, feeling he had equal rights as a decision maker, argued with him and objected to that forced union. His father hit him and threw him out. Grisha was unaware of her pregnancy, as such things back then were kept hidden at all costs. The shame was a forbidden subject. It was winter, and he was barely 12 years old. He gathered what he could and marched towards town. He fell exhausted and was taken in by a shopkeeper who took care of his frostbite. This was the beginning of his career. Lots of struggle, life lessons learned way too early. By 13, he became a scholarship student to Alfred von Glen, a favorite student of Davidoff at the Moscow Conservatory. He never graduated, having taken dual positions as a member of the Lenin String Quartet and solo cellist of the Bolshoi Ballet. With the October Revolution in full swing, he escaped to Poland. After further struggles, he was able to audition for the Warsaw Philharmonic and won the dual solo position. It was there that he was able to perform the standard concertos with orchestra rather than the opera and ballet solos from the Bolshoi. He wanted to get to Germany for further studies and resigned the orchestra after about 2 or 3 years, I can't remember. He found a sponsor, but after a few months, a misunderstanding ended the assistance. In those few months, he studied with Hugo Becker and Julius Klengel. He was again in dire straits, taking any job possible. Word passed in Berlin that the former solo cellist of the Bolshoi was playing nightly at the Café Russo. Friends urged the conductor Furtwängler to give him an audition. It was a spectacular success, and even though a solo position was not announced, Furtwängler created the position. He was barely 21. After 5 seasons, Piatigorsky left the orchestra, having started a solo career that took all his time. He joined a small but important agency of just 3 artists, Horowitz, Milstein, and Piatigorsky. The rest is, I guess, history. Piatigorsky had a sensuous, nimble, highly nuanced concept, all derived from singing. Let's begin with his arrangement of Chopin's Nocturne in C# minor. He's about 30 years old. Good. I hope that's a nice introduction to you about his huge scope of expression. Well, now let's jump forward to 1951. He's age 48. There's a concert with the Boston Symphony in the Haydn Concerto. I'm just going to do the outer movements for time. You'll see what he did in concert rather than in the studio. Lots of freedom, flights of fancy. He used to say that he doesn't believe in inspiration, but rather in fantasy. Maybe that's splitting hairs, but it's an interesting point. It's fun for me to hear the old reorchestration always used back then. Actually, a few things are pretty good. You'll hear Piatigorsky's very personal way with this music, quixotic shifts of energy that enliven alternative passages, and a long, very long, but amazing cadenza. You can hear the famous down bow staccato. That's usually for diminuendos, and the up bow for crescendos. We're waiting, Tyler. Well, I hope that hit you. That is maybe not today's cup of tea, but my God, the flights of fancy, just great. I'm so glad we have this document. You know, so much of broadcast history is lost. It's just too bad. But fortunately, we have a few things like this. So next, moving way ahead, this is to the late 60s. We have a segment from the West German television where he reads from his autobiography in German and demonstrates a few things, the little humorous cadenza that Strauss wrote for him for the second movement of the Haydn Concerto, and then a moment from Don Quixote and the opening of Shlomo. This is all for an audience of one. He's playing rather quietly. It's just very confidential. It's not a concert presentation. It's just in his living room, very quietly. So he'll be reading in German, and I wanted you to hear his, his way with, not with German, who knows, but I mean his way of expression, and then moving from that to the demonstrations. But for those of us who don't read German, I think I'll read that passage to you in English, of course, and you'll have a little background for what you're going to hear in German. This is from his autobiography. It is the practice of concert managers to list on artist's schedule the hour and date of rehearsals and concerts, the fee, and the composition to be played by the soloist. But other details, such as the name of the conductor and the rest of the orchestral program, are seldom mentioned at all. When I entered the stage for the rehearsal in Frankfurt and saw Richard Strauss, it was a shock. He was the last person I expected to be the conductor. I thought it was a mistake, and I was wrong, in the wrong town, but I was about to retreat and he called for me. Actually, I'm going off the book. They knew each other. I mean, they weren't total strangers. I mean, as the soloist in the Berlin Philharmonic with Furtwängler, every year they played his tone poems in many premieres. So they were already acquainted. So Strauss said to the orchestra, "The Haydn Concerto," he said to the orchestra. After a few bars, he stopped and said, "The tutti is too long. It's a concerto, not a symphony. We will make a cut." He counted the number of bars to be left out. "Let's try it." I listened to this impossible cut, but did not dare to protest. At the end of the first movement, he asked me to play the entire cadenza. I did. He wrote it. "Who wrote that?" he asked. I said, "It's mine." He murmured something that sounded like a compliment. After the cadenza of the second movement, he asked in disgust, "Who wrote that?" This cadenza was also mine, but in my embarrassment, I invented Emil Schmorg. Schmorg? It's awful. I will write one for you right now. Gentlemen, intermission. It was a long one. Strauss wrote with pencil in my orchestra score. I still have it. You'll see that in the video. When we were on the stage again, he put the music in front of me, and after a few bars of the orchestra leading to the cadenza, I began to play it. There was a recitative, after which, not believing my eyes, I saw the famous theme of To Eulenspiegel. I played it. There was a roar of laughter. When it subsided, Strauss said, "I prefer the Schmorg." Following the Haydn, everyone except me was in a fine mood for the Don Quixote. I was very nervous. I had played it before, but was it the way the composer wanted it to be? After the big solo variation in D minor, there was a heavy silence. I didn't dare look up at Strauss. Why doesn't he go on to the next variation? I thought anxiously. Finally, he said, "I have heard my Don Quixote as I thought him to be." It was a supreme moment, which lasted even after our concerts. And it lasted even when our concerts. He looked at his watch during my long cadenzas of the Haydn concerto. Strauss spoke of Don Quixote with affection. I'll let Grisha speak the rest. You know, if Grisha were alive today, I would call him Grisha. Okay. Tyler, let's go.
Stadt. Aber als ich mich gerade zurückziehen wollte, rief er mich. Das Haydn-Konzert, sagte er zum Orchester. Nach wenigen Takten unterbrach er und sagte, das Tutti ist zu lang. Es ist ein Konzert und keine Symphonie. Wir werden etwas streichen. Er zählte die Anzahl der auszulassenden Takte. Versuchen wir es. Ich hörte mir diese unmögliche Kürzung an, wagte aber nicht, etwas dagegen zu sagen. Am Ende des ersten Satzes forderte mich Strauss auf, die ganze Kadenz zu spielen. Ich tat es. Wer hat sie geschrieben? Fragte er. Es ist meine eigene, sagte ich. Er murmelte etwas, das wie ein Kompliment klang. Nach der Kadenz im zweiten Satz fragte er voll Abscheu, wer schrieb denn das da? Diese Kadenz stammte auch von mir. Doch in meiner Verlegenheit erfand ich Emil Schmorg. Schmorg? Diese Kadenz ist schrecklich. Ich werde Ihnen jetzt gleich eine andere schreiben. Meine Herren, Pause. Dies ist die kleine Kadenz, die Richard Strauss zum Haydn-Konzert zweiten Satz schrieb. Es war eine lange Pause. Strauss schrieb mit Bleistift in meine Partitur. Ich besitze sie immer noch. Als wir wieder auf dem Podium waren, stellte Strauss die Noten vor mich hin und nach einigen Takten des Orchesters, die zur Kadenz überleiteten, begann ich zu spielen. Da stand ein Rezitativ, nachdem ich meinen Augen kaum trauend das berühmte Thema aus Till Eulenspiegel sah. Ich spielte es. Es erhob sich schallendes Gelächter. Als es sich gelegt hatte, sagte Strauss, der Schmorg ist mir lieber. Nach dem Haydn waren alle außer mir in bester Stimmung für den Don Quixote. Ich war sehr nervös. Ich hatte ihn wohl schon vorher gespielt, aber war es so, wie der Komponist es wünschte? Nach der großen Solo-Variation in D-Moll herrschte tiefe Stille. Ich wagte nicht, zu Strauss aufzublicken. Warum geht er nicht weiter zur nächsten Variation? Fragte ich mich ängstlich. Endlich sagte er, ich hörte meinen Don Quixote, wie ich ihn mir gedacht habe. Es war ein großer Augenblick, dessen Wirkung andauerte, sogar als Strauss bei den Aufführungen während meiner langen Kadenzen im Haydn-Konzert auf seine Uhr blickte. Strauss sprach mit Liebe von seinem Don Quixote. Er dirigierte ihn großartig. Anstelle seiner im Allgemeinen zurückhaltenden Art traten hier Pathos, Humor und Leidenschaft. Sein Sancho Panza besaß genau den Charakter, den Cervantes ihm verliehen hatte. Einige Takte aus Don Quixote, die Dulcinea-Variation. Die Zumutungen, die Strauss an das Bratschen-Solo stellte, waren schwer zu erfüllen. Denn er verlangte vom Bratschisten, dass er nicht schön spiele, sondern stotterte und kratze. Noch nie hat man von mir verlangt, dass ich hässlich und komisch spiele, setzte sich der Musiker zur Wehr. Humor ist eine große Kunst, antwortete Strauss. Strauss versprach mir, ein Cellokonzert zu komponieren. Er schrieb mir, er habe es nicht vergessen. Er werde bald damit beginnen. Doch die Jahre vergingen. Als ich ihn in Wien zum letzten Mal sah, versicherte er es mir wieder. Dann kam Hitler und der Krieg. Der große Verlust für die Cello-Literatur schien nicht mehr wichtig zu sein. Rachmaninow war auf dem Spielplan der Berliner Philharmonie. Von der Ankunft des Komponisten
Okay, I should have read a little bit further in his autobiography just to fill you in on the last few sentences that he was talking about Don Quixote. He said, Strauss spoke of his Don Quixote with affection. He conducted it magnificently. His reserved attitude generally associated with his conducting was replaced with pathos, humor, and passion. And his his Sancho Panza was as characteristic as Cervantes made him. Strauss's demand for the viola solo were hard to take. For instead of playing the part beautifully, he wanted the violist to stutter and scratch. I have never been asked to play ugly and funny, protested the violist. Humor is a great art, Strauss answered. And I should add too, Strauss said that he promised to him a cello concerto. And his messages said he had not forgotten, he would start soon, but years went by, and then he saw him in Vienna and he assured me again. Then came Hitler and the war, and it was a loss, But Grisha did say to us that that when they were talking about a concerto idea, he admired the Lalo concerto of all, and he was thinking of a concerto along those proportions, with a big, introduction and a little like Don Quixote, Okay, Now, next, just some silent film. This is very short, just a few minutes. There's a little bit of, it's not quite backstage, but it's pre-rehearsal at the Hollywood Bowl about 1935. And you'll see composer Nicholas Slonimsky joking with Piatigorsky. And Piatigorsky was a famous sight reader. And Phil Coggan, he's the violist in the orchestra, and he was the film, I want to call him a cinematographer, but he did the amateur film. He holds up a Bach sonata for him to read. And then you'll see some of his solo playing. This is all silent. You cellists will know that he's playing Schumann concerto. So let's, and you'll see some of Tanglewood, 1940, the first year of Tanglewood. And you'll see Koussevitzky, Jesus San Roma, the famous pianist, joking around with Piatigorsky, and Koussevitzky getting into the car. That first year was amazing first year for any festival. Composer in residence was Hindemith. Okay. Tyler, go ahead.
Said, we have a lot of audience. You said.
We have no volume on the video.
There is no volume. This is silent film. Cellist will notice he's playing his Montagnana cello. Okay. All right, so that's just a little tidbit. That's actually filmed from a doctor who was friends with the elite at the first Tanglewood Festival, and so that's where the Tanglewood footage came from. It was actually a home movie, and the last segment with Phil Coggan and Slonimsky, that's from Phil Coggan, I think he was principal viola or assistant principal of the LA Philharmonic, which was also basically the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra. And he did an amazing document for music history. If any of you are interested in getting it, good luck. You have to go to UCLA and go to their archives, and you can watch the whole thing. It's over 2 hours. I'm a collector. That's how I got hold of a lot of this stuff. And the collecting world is a very interesting world. And to participate in this world, you have to do a little under the table kinds of deals. And so therefore I have a lot of this stuff that I'm duty bound not to share it, but I'm doing it tonight because that's the way it should be done. Okay. Next, we have a short film of Piatigorsky playing maybe his most famous arrangement of von Weber's Adagio and Rondo. I don't know if you know about this, but Weber wrote a series of progressive violin sonatas where the violin had the easy part, the piano had the difficult part, you know. Well, Piatigorsky reversed it, and because the music was good, you know. So the Adagio and Rondo is really a spectacular showpiece for cello. It's very short. And this is a film from 1936 or so. It's called, well, I won't tell you, I don't know the exact name that they called it, but back in the day, back in the 30s, there were Vitaphones. And Vitaphones were films that were pre-sound on film. And the way it worked, we had a special projector. We had big 16-inch discs that were locked to a slave unit that worked with the film itself. And you had to align it just perfectly. And this was the beginning of sound on, not sound on film, sound with film. And it was very precarious. I mean, you had to just do it exactly right. A telephone can't ring before the guy picks it up, in other words, you know. So they did this with a lot of sound effects before, you know, the jazz singer of 1927. All this stuff was just being processed. It was not solidified. So Warner Brothers had the Vitaphone series, and they, you know,
now you can with Simple Scale from Moonlight.
Hello, somebody's talking. You have to mute if I'm talking. Okay. So I'm long-winded about this, but the Vitaphone was a cumbersome situation and very, very dangerous. And so to replace that, and those Vitaphones had everything from, you know, concert violinists like Spalding and Elmon and all kinds of things, to kind of vaudeville sorts of things. To replace that, when sound became more, more, you know, versatile, they had these concert films in Europe. And these were in lieu of newsreels or those old Vitaphones. A movies had these precursors introducing an A movie with some class, you know. And so you had this series of short films of great artists playing. And this is one of them. Unfortunately, it was the end of the series, and this is in the middle 30s. And I must say that the editing is just awful. And you'll laugh a little about it, but the soundtrack is right, except at the last 3 or 4 seconds. It's really lousy. But you're going to see some great cello playing, the Adagio and Rondo by Weber. And you got to see that fabulous down bow staccato. He described it to us students as right hand vibrato. Well, that's easy for him to say. I stood behind him so many times to ask him how he did that staccato. And I really practiced it. I know everybody did. And I was able to do it somewhat, but it never became natural for me to do it. The only student that I know that played it so beautifully is Nick Rosen. Nick Rosen just absorbed it. He didn't do it the same way Grisha did it. He did it his own way. That was the beautiful thing about Grisha's teaching, is that you were invited into the world of understanding. And either you did or you didn't, or you worked or you didn't work enough. But he understood the beauty of that staccato. It's always beautiful to see. You can survive without that, as most of us do. But if you have it, it's a beautiful thing to do. Anyhow. All right, so that was, you could see the terrible editing at the end of that thing. This was shot in very cheap circumstances. I'm sure it was shot in 16 millimeter and not in 35, But again, grateful to have whatever we can have. Piatigorsky said that he came to the studio in Paris at like 6 a.m. and did, maybe a dozen short pieces, and only one of them survived. Well, gratefully, this one. What do you say we have a little pause here, take a 5-minute break? If you have some questions, we can probably answer them later. On the second half, we'll have the 1967 Casals Festival with Casals conducting Piatigorsky and Schumann Concerto, and them playing the Schubert Quintet with Alexander Schneider first. Somebody's got the sound on. Okay, Alexander Schneider, Isidore Cohen, Milton Thomas, Piatigorsky, and Pablo. So that's after the little break we're going to take. If you have some questions, jot them down, and I'm happy to see if I can attempt them. There's a lot of us students out there too, so they can fill in if I'm faulty at anything. All right, have a good break.
I was going to add that for those that think that Piatigorsky only had a down bow staccato, in the Prokofiev Mask in that film, he has a really great up bow staccato.
Of course. Jeff, I mentioned that. That the up goes for more of a crescendo. Oh, well, never mind. Of course.
But it's the only place on film.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Happy. I'm very happy that we have this stuff. And I'm so happy that all my colleagues are here. That's the beautiful thing about our class. And our class is, before my time, before any of our times, and after the times. That's the beautiful thing about us, that we support each other. And that was the beautiful thing about the class. If we were competitive, if somebody was competitive, it was a source of inspiration, not of ugliness. That was sort of not allowed. You had to support each other. And it was a beautiful thing. You used your energy to become better, to express yourself. But it wasn't like he's better than I am and he's better than I am. The thing was, if somebody had something you needed, you made a good friend there, and you spent some time with that friend to show him what you needed. And that was the spirit of the class. It was for us to share our talents with each other, our abilities and our weaknesses. Everybody has them, and there's no pretending that you could ignore your problems. It's just silly. That's the beautiful thing about our class. We're still friends. All of us communicate with each other. If anybody has a success, God, we rejoice in anybody's success. It's just great. With other people that I know, somebody else's success is my failure. Oh my God, what a way to live. But that's a lot of people, I'm sorry to say. Maybe I shouldn't be so opinionated. I'm just trying to describe the beauty of the gift that Grisha gave us. So let's have a little break.
Thanks, Terry. We'll take about 5 minutes, everybody, and get up, move around, get a glass of water, use the restroom, whatever you need to do. We'll be back in about 5. Thanks. Terry, you ready to
Sure, you
start
bet.
the second half?
Yeah.
Terrific. I just want to say we have 57 people on the Zoom tonight, and welcome everybody. So I just wanted to say one thing. We are going to try to do an in-person event this summer, if people are game. We're looking at the date of July 10th, place to be determined, but I just wanted to let people know. And I'll just announce again, we have our last online presentation of the season on June 17th with David Starkweather, who's going to talk about his Bach edition. So with that, I hand it back to you, Terry. Look forward to the second half.
Okay. All right. So my friends, just for time's sake, I'm going to do the first movement of the Schumann Concerto with Casals conducting Piatigorsky, Casals Festival 1967, and follow that with the Schubert Quintet from the same season, and with the Casals and Piatigorsky. Piatigorsky is playing the second cello part for the first time in his life. And the first violin is Alexander Schneider, second violin is Isidore Cohen, and viola is Milton Thomas. This was a interesting period in his life. It was basically in his retirement. But he was somewhat inspired during this time. Inspired is the wrong word, I think, but anyhow, bringing together all these personalities from his past, I think inspired him. The Casals Festival Orchestra, was just a tremendous orchestra. I mean, Zubin Mehta conducted him in Don Quixote at the same festival, and I have it on film of Mehta talking about it. That he says they were swimming. He and Grisha were swimming in the Caribbean, and he said, "Why don't we play something together?" And he says, "Well, sure. Well, how about Don Quixote?" "Great, let's do Don Quixote. I'll cancel the Bruckner Fourth Symphony. We'll do that instead." So he phoned LA Philharmonic librarian, "Send parts, next airplane over." Well, they couldn't send the wind machine, which was part of the flight in Don Quixote, but they sent the parts, and everybody knew it. The whole orchestra says in 2 rehearsals that was perfect. Everybody was right together with it. Unfortunately, in the Casals Festival, it's like NBC and CBS and all these people back in the day, they saw video as occupying space. So they either recorded over it or threw it away and made room for the new. Instead of stockpiling it or doing something, archiving it in some way. That's why we don't have things from the past, from the Tonight Show, NBC, back in the day when Steve Allen had the show. It was a wonderful show, but there were I don't know, at least 2 performances with Art Tatum, the great jazz pianist, and there's not good footage of him playing, not enough. God, wouldn't it be great to see that? Oh, I'm going off the subject. The thing is, archiving is important. Nowadays, it's easy. Back in the day, it was more troublesome because of the physical nature of it. All right, so with the Casals Festival, what I was leading up to is some wise person decided they're only going to save anything that Pablo had to do with. In other words, he was conductor or he was playing cello. Otherwise, they dumped everything else. can you imagine the mind that would make that decision? It's just unbelievable. If you know the Casals Festival, my God, the greatest people from all over the world played in that orchestra and were soloists, you know? I mean, how could you throw away stuff? Well, fortunately, we have Casals conducting Piatigorsky, and we have the Schubert quintet with Casals playing one and Piatigorsky playing two. Wow, this is a lovely thing to have. So, my friends, I'm sorry to go on about this, but I'm just grateful that there are things left. So, let's see what any of my notes here. I think I've said everything that's important. So in the Schumann, it's quite a laid back performance, and but it's full of soul, and I hope you enjoy it. So grateful to have that. I hope it becomes public and we can fix up the sound. It's wonderful, just wonderful. I don't know if you noticed, but Pablo was unprepared for the cadenza, which isn't exactly what Schumann wrote. Grisha claimed that he saw some sketches to expansion of the written cadenza in Schumann's relatives in that circle. And there were some scraps of sketches. Anyhow, we'll never know. Whatever, it seems like a good place for a cadenza. And I think it prepares the coda just great. Without it, okay, fine. But I think it's beautiful to do the cadenza that he wrote, or somebody else's cadenza, depending. So Pablo wasn't prepared for that cadenza. He forgot, if you can notice, he cued the orchestra when he was still in his cadenza in the beginning of it. Okay. So next we're going to have in this same season, this summer season of 67, I think we can get through the first movement of the quintet, the Schubert quintet. I wasn't planning for us to do the last movement, but are you sorry? Okay. So first movement of the Schubert quintet with Pablo on first and Piatigorsky on the second cello part. First time he ever played that part, because he's always the first cello. Even with established string quartets like Budapest Quartet, they always relinquish the first part to Grisha. The first violinist was Alexander Snyder. The second is Isidore Cohen. And the violist is our friend, Milton Thomas. Those of us who were in LA, we just love this guy. We had many parties at his house and he was a great mensch. We just loved him. And so did Grisha. Yeah. I think Pablo did too. Anyhow, without my babbling on, let's hear the beginning of the quintet. You have to realize that Pablo is in his 91st year. He's playing rather well for anybody in that category at all. It's really quite a beautiful document for us to have. Okay, enough of me. Goodbye. By the way, this video lack that you see or lagging that you see is part of just the nature of Zoom. We couldn't fix it. So you're going to see things a little bit in the lagging. So you just have to deal with it. I'm sorry. We can't fix it.